Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today we are travelling all the way back to 1998 to play a little title that I not only played back in the day, but is also one based on a franchise that I absolutely love and adore. So open up your minds everyone and start to believe as we tackle The X-Files on PlayStation 1. The X-Files likely needs very little introduction for most of you. It's one of the most famous and popular sci-fi franchises of the 90s, if not all time. The show follows the exploits of FBI agents Fox Mulder and Dana Scully as they investigate all things supernatural and paranormal as they delve into the FBI's X-Files, cases that are deemed unsolvable or given very little priority. Fox Mulder, played by David Duchovny, is the believer character. He's the one with all the knowledge of the paranormal and supernatural. He believes that his sister was abducted by aliens at a young age, and this is part of what drives him to expose the conspiracies and cover-ups at the heart of the United States government. Dana Scully, on the other hand, played by Gillian Anderson, is the more grounded, skeptic character. She doesn't believe in Mulder's delusions, and is at first sent to kind of keep an eye on him. Of course, over time she comes to believe because, well, it actually all happens, doesn't it really? And it would be daft of her not to, and that's the point of the show. The X-Files was nothing short of a cultural phenomenon, incredibly popular not just in nerdy circles, but also in the mainstream. People fell in love with the characters of Mulder and Scully, leading to references in a myriad of TV shows, including the crossover with The Simpsons. Now, whether it was the entrancing opening theme, the chemistry between the two main characters, or the many monsters and mysteries provided, people fell in love with this show. With Mulder and Scully, you also had many a bisexual awakening, including my own, and all I say is that between this show, with David Duchovny as Mulder, Buffy the Vampire Slayer with Spike and Angel, I had no bloody chance, did I? But it wasn't just bisexuality being awakened by Mulder and Scully's exploits. Many a trauma was also being planted in the population, with some X-Files episodes, especially in the early days, ranking as some of the scariest moments on television. I'm sure there are many a 90s kid out there that'll still recoil when I mention the name Tooms. So, your X-Files episodes would usually come in one of two flavours. You'd have these Monster of the Week type episodes. Usually it's about a serial killer who could fit through weird gaps, the appearance of a cryptid, and that one time they did a crossover with the TV show Cops. Or you would get an episode based on the show's mythology, which is all to do with the underlying alien conspiracy that Mulder was trying to uncover. So I absolutely adored this show. I still do, and I was maybe a bit too young for it when it first started airing. I remember seeing that aforementioned Tooms episode at way too young an age, and that totally put me off. I was never really good at horror. I'm still not great at it. But a couple of years later, my tolerance for such things had kind of heightened a little bit, and kind of realised it maybe wasn't as horror-laden as I thought. I remember seeing more episodes of it, especially when my dad came home from working away, and me and him would watch it, as along with things like Star Trek Voyager and whatever was on the Sci-Fi Channel at the time, and I just really fell in love with it. So around that time, I asked my mum to get me the game for the PC, because I knew there was a game out, and I still have the game right here for the PC. It's the same as the PS1, but I will go into. The PC version has 7 CDs. Now, unfortunately, I have long lost the big box that this came in, but I still really love that. And this particular game, developed by Hyperbole Studios and published by Fox Interactive, was one of only 2 games, like 2 proper games released based on the X-Files franchise, which actually seems quite weird given how influential and big the show was. The other game in question would not be released until 2004, and this was a PS2 title called Resist or Serve. I played this on my stream a couple of years ago, and it plays more like a traditional survival horror game, a la Resident Evil or Silent Hill. I did have a good time with it, and I do want to go back to it at some point. But this particular title is a FMV Point and Click adventure game. You play as FBI agent Craig Wilmore, and you are given the case of investigating the disappearance of agents Mulder and Scully by FBI Assistant Director Walter Skinner. So yeah, this is an FMV game. One of those ones from the 90s you might have heard of in passing, like The Seventh Guest, or perhaps more infamously, Night Trap. Everything in this game is live action. It's acted out on a real set with real actors. It is essentially an interactive episode of The X-Files. and it even has many of the actors reprising their role. Anderson and Duchovny are in this game. Mitch Pileggi is in it as Skinner. The Lone Gunmen are in there as well. This game featured a script with some 700 pages, 6 hours of recorded footage, and a development cost of around $6 million. The script itself was written by actual X-Files writers, and it was based on a story by Chris Carter. So what I'm saying is, this wasn't a throwaway title, this wasn't a cash-in, it was a project that they took quite seriously. Something that would actually work out, because the game was a commercial success, but it was a mixed bag critically. Some critics did give it high scores. PC Gaming World gave it a 9.5, Entertainment Weekly gave it a B+, but I think your more gaming enthusiast magazines like PC Zone and PC Gamer ranked it very low. One of them giving it a 40%, the other giving it a 35%. The PS1 version didn't fare much better with them sort of critics, with a few outlets giving it quite low scores. I think the general consensus was that it was well produced, well acted, but critics kind of struggled to see the fun in it or really get past it being an FMV game. So when did I play this? I played it back when I was about 11 or 12, and maybe it was my youth and being heavily into the X-Files, but I remember really enjoying it. And it is one that I've wanted to tackle again for quite some time. So I've decided to play the PS1 title, just to see how it handles on that particular platform. To be honest, I'm already anticipating what some of the issues might be, controller versus mouse, but I'm expecting the core point and click mechanics to be pretty decent. One of the other reasons I've kind of opted for PS1 is ease of recording and getting it working. I think it's probably a bit of a pain to get the old PC version working, so opted for the easier option here. So, let's play some X-Files. Our game begins very much like any episode of the X-Files actually would, with a classic cold open. We're treated to some shots of a derelict warehouse, and who else should turn up but our heroes Mulder and Scully. They break into the warehouse, look around a bit, and Mulder finds some dirt on the ground. He's not given much chance to think about the dirt on the ground before things absolutely kick off. A bunch of dudes storm in, start shooting at the two of them. Scully gets shot, there's a flash of light and a bewildered looking Mulder before we kick off into the infamous opening sequence. Title screen and menus. Let's have a look at what we have on offer as far as the options go. First up, there's an option called Artificial Intuition. This is a kind of in-game hint system to avoid players getting stuck and frustrated. We can also set the difficulty of the action scenes here as well. Now, my only experience with this is with the PC version, where you control it via the mouse, and the action sequences weren't too bad there. But now I'm on a controller, I know the cursor's going to be slower, so I do opt to play these on easy. But I keep Artificial Intuition off. The one option I don't see in the menu is one for subtitles, which feels like quite a strange omission for a dialogue and audio heavy game such as this. I know subtitles were not exactly a standard back in this time, but I do think, given the production values and the X-Files team being behind it, I would have expected it, and it is a shame that they aren't in there. But we're all set up, let's get into the game itself. Now we find ourselves in an FBI branch office in Seattle, Washington. I should note that I'm playing the game on a rather large TV screen, the sort that did not exist back when this game came out, so the quality of the game has taken a little bit of a hit. It's not awful, but it is worth pointing out that it might appear a tad pixelated and stretched to you. And this is where we meet our main character, Agent Craig Wilmore, who enters, immediately greeted by the other agent at the office, Cook. We are told that we've picked a great day to arrive late. A bloke's flown in from Washington. We get to pick a type of response. We could be funny, paranoid, indifferent. Nice little touch to help keep your character your own. I opt to be funny, I get a line about paper clips, and Cook buggers off back to his office, and we are free to move around. Fairly early days, but yeah, I'm a little bit impressed by what I'm seeing. The production seems tight. Cold Open was maybe a bit shorter than a real episodes would have been, but believable. Felt like it could have been part of an episode. The acting from your two agents in the office seemed fine, no lingering awkwardness that I have seen with FMV games. Like I say, it's early days, and we'll see how other characters fare as the game goes on. Now, being a point and click, the gameplay is fairly easy to get grips with. You move your cursor with the D-pad, hover over interactable items, the icon will change based on what you can do. A finger in a particular direction to move in that direction, eye to examine, mouth to talk to, a gripping hand with the animated blue line to interact with the item. Now if you don't fancy moving slowly, you do have another option. You can hold R2, press a direction on the D-pad to jump between various hotspots for the area that you're in. Incredibly beneficial for sections you might need a little bit of speed for. So I take Craig to his desk, and before I can really do anything, he has to take a call from his boss. We have to make our way to the boss's office, and this is where we're introduced to Walt Skinner, the Assistant Director of the FBI, and another character from the show. Skinner tells us that two of his agents, Mulder and Scully, have gone missing, and we are tasked with tracking them down. In typical point-and-click fashion, we're able to ask a few questions, get a few items for our inventory, and then we can start our investigation. But then Cook asks us what is happening. Again, we can pick the response. I can also then give him the current cases Wilmore's working on, because this is meant to be Wilmore's priority now, and then we go back to the office. I can access his computer, file an APB on the two agents, and get that little bit more freedom to explore. Now what I do like here is that developers have accounted for the fact that players might decide to, for lack of better terms, dick about. The most innocent example of this is a tape dispenser on Wilmore's desk. If you interact with it, he'll take a piece off, pop it onto his nose, and it's just an amusing little scene. But you can do a few more, shall we say, extreme things. Head back into Shank's office, pull out your gun, and they'll start to question what you're up to. If you pull the trigger, you will get a scene of Wilmore in prison getting his mugshot taken. There's a similar thing if you try to arrest one of them. You get this scene where you are asked to turn your badge in. They're daft little touches, but I really like that developers have considered and allowed for things like this. It makes you feel like you're genuinely in the world and being this character, rather than being constrained. So let's go to our first location, the inn where Mulder and Scully were staying during their own investigation. An investigation we know nothing about at this point, I should add. We can talk to Skinner some more, and we can also examine the two rooms to learn more about the agents and hopefully find some evidence of what they were working on. We get some logs of outgoing phone calls, vehicle registration numbers, as well as a few little odds and ends. Then we can go back to the bureau and use Wilmore's computer again to look up to trace the phone numbers and the plates to get more information. It's a really neat little part of the game, and I always like it when games like this make you feel like you are doing the thing your character is. And what I mean by that is you're meant to be an FBI investigator. Rather than the game just kind of taking for granted that you have this thing and now you know what to do with it, it actually makes you do the thing with it. Actually makes you take the number, put it into the computer, learn where to go from it. You feel like you are investigating, you feel like you are cross-referencing things and getting new information based off it. It makes you feel like you are doing something and contributing. But what do we get from this evidence? We find links to a warehouse. And as you might have already guessed, it is the one we saw from the cold open. We break into said warehouse, much to Skinner's disapproval when we use a lockpick, and we look around and bloody hell is it a large location. And this is where I ran into a little bit of trouble. It is a very large space and a little bit confusing to navigate, and it took me a while to get everything I kind of needed to. Like a lot of point and clicks, there's a little bit of a pixel hunty element here, but thanks to the quick hotspot jumping, it does make it a bit easier to exhaust all the items you can interact with. This is especially helpful when it's not obvious that something is there. Now while we're here, we find the same stuff that Mulder examined in the cold open. We find a bullet, we find some blood. We also get to meet a local fisherman outside the warehouse to find out if he knows anything. And then we can take a photo with this vehicle that's been watching us since we left the warehouse. So let's go back to the office, take a quick detour at the crime lab to drop off some of our evidence and get that analysed. But when we get back to the warehouse, unfortunately, Skinner has to return to Washington. But before he goes, he asks us to run surveillance in the warehouse later that night. Before we do that, we take some time to run through the evidence we gathered, new names we learned, we analyse the license plate from the car, and learn that it's a government vehicle, and the data on it is restricted. Intriguing. And then you have a little bit of a catch-up with Cook before we go back to the warehouse, only now there are people there. So let's go at the front door and, oops. Okay, let's not go to the front door. Let's go around the back. Night vision goggles are on, and what's this? Some absolute lads. And they're up to no good. They're hiding something in there. So let's hold on a moment. Wait until they go out, go forward, and pick up whatever it was they're hiding. And when I say go forward, what I mean is, in my case, fanny on for about 5 to 10 minutes trying to figure out where exactly they put it because I'm an idiot. But we figure it, we find it, we go home, back home for the evening. And then in Wilmore's apartment, we can examine a few things and learn a bit more about him and his life. It's no touch here that you don't have to do, but it's cool to get these glimpses into the character. We find out he's got a kid, we find out he had a wife that he's now separated from. There's some notes about the cases he has been working on. And like I said, nice little glimpse into the character, which kind of shows the thought that has gone into this. This is a character they developed, they wanted to create, not just some avatar that you were inhabiting. So this is kind of the basic flow of the game, and I don't really want to do a play-by-play of the rest of it, as I don't want to spoil the story, and it is ultimately a point and click, so I think you kind of have seen the gameplay elements here. What I would say is that the story feels very much like a canon episode of the show. It could very easily fit into one of the Myth-Arc episodes. The flow of it doesn't really change. You go to locations, gather evidence, meet characters, run the evidence through or past the appropriate people to unlock the next location you go to or the next bit of dialogue. It's a point-and-click adventure game. There's no surprises here. The characters themselves, pretty good. I don't really have a problem with any of them. I didn't find any of the interactions awkward. I have played a few FMV games in the past. I've played a few games where you have this sort of interactivity and sometimes it's very awkward when you were talking to a character, but it felt like they fit in pretty well here. What about the difficulty? So there's a few moments where I wasn't 100% sure where to go or what to do. As with most point and clicks, you will find these sorts of occasions. You just have to exhaust everything, and it's quite easy to forget maybe what some of the options are. The other thing that can happen is you might have a handful of sequences where if you take the wrong path, it ends up bad for our hero, so make sure you save often. Now, there is one more mechanic introduced to the game. It doesn't actually come into play until around the 3rd disc, and these are the action sequences, and this is basically where you have to use your gun. I don't know if it's because I was on PlayStation and misremembering how it was on the PC. I don't know if maybe my copy had been a little bit scratched because I did have a few skips in it, but I did find the action sequences on the PlayStation really awkward. You can have your reticle over an enemy, fire, and it doesn't do anything. Instead, it seemed to require me to have the reticule in a very particular place over the enemy to register. I'm thinking either it is a problem with the copy that I have, or because it's an FMV game, there's some reason for it. But this was definitely evident to me on the 4th disc. There's one particular bit where you have to take down 2 guys, and it just took way too many attempts and made me question if my game was broken or not. Still, after about 4 to 5 hours, I make it through at the end of the game, and let's wrap this one up. It's really clear to me, having completed this game as an older person, that the developers and others involved really did care about what they were doing with the title. This wasn't a project thrown together to cash in on a thriving franchise. It was put together with care and executed rather well. It might suffer for some because we don't get to see the actors from the actual show for too long. Mulder and Scully don't really appear too much outside of the opening and towards the end. Skinner is only in it for a brief time, and some of the other cameos are kind of here and there. But I don't think any of that time that they were in it was wasted, and to be honest, all the other actors, all the other characters in the game really held their own. What I would say, it's an absolutely fine point and click. I don't think it ranks as one of my favourites. I would have several I'd put ahead of it, but if you are a fan of the X-Files, I think you would get some enjoyment from it. I think maybe being an FMV title might have let it down a little bit in terms of what they might have been able to do with it. Maybe if they had gone for a more traditional point-and-click adventure game, then they could have had more fun with additional puzzles or more investigative elements. They could have lengthened the game a touch more and vastly improved the action sequences. In my head, I'm imagining this being redone in the style of something like Snatcher. I would also say that setting it as part of the Myth-Arc was cool, even more so that it was adapted from a story by Chris Carter, the creator of the X-Files, but again, did that hold it back a little bit? If they'd gone for more Monster of the Week, it could have freed it up to do a touch more. Still, I did enjoy the game, and I think it's probably one of the better examples of an FMV game out there from this era. Which leads to the next question. How easy is this one to get hold of? Well, copies of it for the PS1 go for about £20 on eBay. PC version, not too pricey either, around the same. But getting it working on a modern machine might be a little bit tricky. Unfortunately, it's not one that is available on the likes of GOG, and due to it being an X-Files licensed game, and Fox Interactive as the publisher, and God knows who holding the rights to Fox Interactive stuff, I don't know if it ever will come out for them platforms. It's probably not a high priority for people. I don't know how well it's wishlisted or anything, so getting it for the PS1 might be your best bet. I do think it is a bit of a shame that more has not been done gaming-wise with the X-Files license. We did get that survival horror game on the PS2, but that's pretty much it. That's your law. This point and click or the survival horror game. Now, there was a game influenced by it, Thimbleweed Park, which is a more traditional point and click, which might be worth checking out if you want something adjacent, but certainly nothing with the X-Files license. Now, that could just be there's no appetite for it. Personally, I do think that when you had that spate of like Telltale-style episodic games, which is still going on now, that might have been a good place for an X-Files game to fit in. You know, something where maybe you investigated a different thing each episode and it all tied together in a final episode. You know, could have done something nice like Monster of the Week, Myth Arc, Monster of the Week, Myth Arc, something like that. But like I say, it could be a hard thing to license. Maybe no one's had that idea or whatever else. I just do think there's some potential there for something you could do with the X-Files license, because the X-Files inhabited a number of genres beyond science fiction. You had horror elements, you had drama, you had the interplay between Mulder and Scully, the character building, so there's potential there. Now, with all of that said, I would love to hear your thoughts. Was this a game you played back in the day? Were you a fan of the show, and has this little review maybe inspired you to check out the show or the game itself? Please do leave a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more retro gaming content. Until next time, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll see you again in a future video. Goodbye.